Next on Unsolved Mysteries, a young woman is brutally murdered in a secluded field. What the killers don't know is that there is a witness to their crime. 2 patients nearly die after a nurse poisons their IVs. Will she be caught before she strikes again? A man accused of stealing millions from the government vanishes while scuba diving. The FBI believes that he is still alive. And the surprising identity of a serial rapist who eluded police for more than 20 years. 5 fascinating mysteries, some just waiting to be solved. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. Pomona, California.
We have one. Dr. Austin,
we've got a problem in 201.
A medical emergency at a rehabilitation center. 2 patients are in acute distress.
One of the patients was definitely flushed, definitely having difficulty breathing, and the other patient was unconscious. She didn't respond to me at all.
Go get the supervisor now!
I had seen them the night before, and they were fine. There was nothing wrong with them, you know, other than needing their medication. You know, they looked really well.
Just leave him. It's
Valerie, get the nursing supervisor down here now.
Okay.
The patients have been receiving intravenous antibiotics for similar infections. As the staff works to stabilize them, nursing supervisor Lizette Nukita remains calm. But Art Gregory, the director of nursing, is alarmed from the start.
I knew that we had something very seriously wrong here. There was no way that this could be a coincidence that this happened to these patients, that they had the same reaction from this medication at the same time.
Paul, I need you to take those IVs and bring them.
The patients are rushed to a nearby hospital for emergency treatment. Both have insulin shock. Both survive. But as a precaution, every IV bag in the facility is confiscated for analysis. Hospital officials were stunned to find that a total of 16 IV bags had been contaminated with potentially lethal doses of insulin. Worse still, it appeared to be intentional. The FBI was called in to investigate. One of the first people the FBI questioned was Lizette Nukita, the nurse who had administered the IVs.
She was a nursing supervisor on duty that night.
Nukita had worked at the facility for 6 months. In that time, she had earned a reputation as a hard-working nurse who took her job very seriously.
Now, where are the IVs kept?
They're kept in a storage room right down the hall.
And who has access to them?
Only a handful of people had access to the medical supplies. Nukita was one of them. She said that she noticed nothing suspicious about any of the IV bags.
If you have anything to add, please don't hesitate to call me. Here's my card.
It was determined that the product tampering had occurred at the rehabilitation center. Lizette Nukita was working during that shift and the supervisor on duty, and we decided to call her in for another interview.
Is your name Lizette Nukita?
Yes.
6 months into the investigation, Lizette Nukita agreed to take a polygraph test. Midway through, she dropped a bombshell.
Did you cause insulin to be introduced into the IVs of 2 patients on the morning of February 8th, 1991?
Yes.
Are you telling me now you did it?
Yes.
When I interviewed Lizette, she told me that she injected the IVs with insulin to cause a reaction so that an investigation would be conducted and ultimately she could turn herself in.
Why?
Because I have had these terrible headaches, and I haven't been able to get the help that I needed, and I have gone to these doctors, and I have gone to the hospital, and I have taken these pills, and nothing
She told
has
me
helped,
that she had read or heard that the best medical care available was for people in prison or jail, and that if she was ultimately arrested and incarcerated, she would receive the treatment that she needed for her headaches.
She was playing basically Russian roulette with these people's lives. There's no way that you could measure the amount of insulin to be given through those IVs and know that you were going to make them severely sick without killing them.
Nikita was arrested and jailed while awaiting trial.
Is it okay if I get a drink of water?
As far as anyone remembers, she never requested treatment for her headaches. It was at jail that Nikita met a 40-year-old prisoner who we'll call Steve. He had been convicted of smuggling heroin.
I want you to promise me one thing. I'm being transferred up to Lompoc next week.
Great.
Steve and Nikita managed to carry on a jailhouse romance. They met several times and began to exchange letters.
Go ahead. I'll see you later.
Steve was transferred to the federal prison in Lompoc, California. A month before that, Nikita had been released on bail. She moved in with her parents to await trial and finally sought treatment for her headaches. Nikita and Steve stayed in close contact through letters and phone calls.
Hello?
She was obsessed with this man who was always writing to her long letters and calling on the phone.
Yeah, I was just writing.
I think she didn't have any hope, and she was devastated with the idea of going back to prison. And she used to say, well, he's the only one that loved me.
By virtue of the authority vested in me...
Nikita and Steve were married in the prison chapel at Lompoc. 3 months later, Nikita told her family that she was going to Lompoc and would soon return. What she didn't tell them was that her husband was going to be released on parole later that same day. The FBI believes that Nikita picked Steve up at the prison gate and they ran off to start a new life together. 2 months later, Nikita's family received this letter, written in Spanish and postmarked Oxnard, California. Nikita wrote, "I love you and please forgive me for everything I have done." She also mentioned that she was working in a school as both a cook and a nurse.
The fact that Lisette is out there somewhere and has a good chance of possibly working as a healthcare worker really scares me. Because if she has done this once, what's to say that under similar circumstances, she won't do this again?
Update. 3 years after they disappeared, Lisette, Nikita, and Steve were tracked down and arrested in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Steve was returned to prison for violating the conditions of his parole. He has since been released. Nikita pleaded guilty to 6 counts of tampering with medical products and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. She served her time and has been released. Next, police need your help to find a mysterious man who witnessed a brutal murder in Florida. Miami, Florida.
911 police on fire.
A man calls 911 and tells a police operator that he had just witnessed a horrible crime in the town of Belle Glade, 80 miles to the north.
Sí.
¿En dónde lo mataron?
In a rushed, nervous voice, the caller says that he was hunting illegally in a sugarcane field when he heard a car in the distance. The man says that as he ran to hide, a blue Ford Bronco pulled up. A man and a woman got out. She called him Ricardito. What you are about to hear is a translation of the eyewitness's phone call to the police.
They started to argue, the girl and him.
Give me the money. I'll get it for you. I promise I'm going to kill you.
It appeared to be a drug problem.
You don't believe me? You see what I can do?
He was telling her to give him the money.
I don't have the money.
She told him she could not give him the money yet. There were two of them. The young man appeared to be Cuban, and the other Mexican, by the way he spoke.
I'm gonna kill you. Give me the money.
She was shouting, Ricardito, don't kill me, Ricardito. After he killed her, he dragged her away. So I got down on my knees because I thought if this person sees me, they're going to kill me too. Then the Bronco pulled away. I saw a 7 and a 2 on the license plate. Then I left because I was scared. But later I thought it's a crime.
Perhaps fearing for his safety, the eyewitness waited more than a week before contacting police. He never revealed his identity, but he did provide them with enough clues to begin their investigation. The caller said that the sugarcane field was behind a building shaped like a giant ice cream cone. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department sent a detective to investigate.
I saw like a small brown object in the tall grass area. And after I got there, I realized it was the body of a female at that time, but the body was in a state at which, at that time, I couldn't determine which race it was.
It was a very heinous crime. It was very violent. I believe that the suspect had a lot of disregard for a human life. She had been laying there for approximately a week, maybe a few days longer. She had passed the decomposition stage, and she had started to get into mummification. Her right thumbprint was the only print left. The majority of her fingers had already turned to skeleton. And with that right thumbprint, we were able to make an identification and prove that she was, in fact, Rebecca Young.
Rebecca Young was a 21-year-old resident of Belgrade. Her mother had also been murdered when Rebecca was just 12 years old. At that time, Rebecca went to live with her aunt. Police looked into Rebecca's background and discovered that she had become involved with a man known to be a petty criminal.
She had gotten hooked up with a person who had gotten her into a different type of life than she was accustomed to. He started introducing her to the drug scene and prostitution and things of this nature. He had beat her up on more than one occasion and had intimidated her and threatened her into this type of lifestyle.
Police have determined that the man is not a suspect in Rebecca's murder, but they do believe that his activities may have led to her death.
This person may have robbed the client without Rebecca's knowledge that he was going to do this. Rebecca may have suffered the consequences as a result of his actions.
3 weeks after Rebecca's murder, the Sheriff's Department arrested a possible suspect. He was a local man who reportedly told a prostitute that he had killed a black woman. Police suspected that the man was drunk or stoned at the time they pulled him in.
Would you stop me, sir? Step to the back of your car. I know what you guys want, right man. There, come on, give me.
Before I could interview him, he told me that I wanted to talk to him about a murder. And when I told him, no, I wanted to talk to him about the prostitute he had been out with, he said, I don't want to talk to you, I want an attorney. And at that point where we didn't have any further evidence that he was involved in this, I had to release him.
Even though the suspect was released, police believe that he was somehow involved in Rebecca's murder. But they need proof. They're searching for the eyewitness who originally called to report the crime. Not much is known about the man, except that his name is Antonio. He said that he called from a payphone because he didn't have a line at home. Judging from Antonio's accent, police believe that he was born in Cuba. This is a portion of the actual tape recording of Antonio's telephone call.
Entonces estoy cazando con él y veo que llega un bronco azul con la chapa 72. Entonces ellos empezaron a discutir, la muchacha y él. Entonces él le parece que es un problema de droga, ¿no? Entonces donde él le decía.
The police and Rebecca's friends and family hope that Antonio will come forward. If you have any information, please log on to our website at unsolved.com. Next, a wealthy heiress dies, leaving a $1 billion estate. Some say that she was murdered for her money. Los Angeles, California, March 4th, 1993.
I want you to understand that I have no family.
80-year-old Doris Duke is about to change the terms of her will. But hers is not just any will. Doris is one of the wealthiest women in America, worth more than $1.2 billion. Waiting in the wings is the person who arguably stands to gain the most from Doris's death, her butler, Bernard Lafferty. As sole executor of the estate, Lafferty would be given a fee estimated to be $5 million. In addition, he would receive $500,000 a year for life.
I cannot believe she would have put that kind of trust into Bernard. It's just not possible. There had to be some collusion. There was a manipulation between, in my feeling, between Bernard Lafferty, the doctors, and the lawyers.
The last will and testament of Doris Duke was bitterly contested. There were even allegations of murder. It was a sordid end to a charmed life. Doris Duke was the only child of tobacco tycoon James Buchanan Duke. She was just 12 years old when her father died, leaving her $100 million, a third of his holdings. The press called her the richest girl in the world. As Doris grew up, her fortune grew too, from millions to over $1 billion.
She personified the rich during the Great Depression. She was a cross between Princess Di and Madonna in the press. People treated her as if she were a major, major star.
Doris Duke led an eccentric and lavish lifestyle. She was married twice, divorced twice, and reportedly had dozens of lovers. Among them, movie idol Errol Flynn, General George S. Patton, and Duke Kahanamoko, the Olympic swimming champion. Kahanamoko allegedly fathered Doris's only child, a daughter who died at birth in 1940. Doris was 27. It wasn't until Doris was well past 70 that she adopted a daughter, a 35-year-old woman named Shandy Hefner. In 1987, Doris changed her will and named Shandy as executor. Eventually, she and Shandy had a falling out, but not before Shandy introduced Doris to Bernard Lafferty.
He was an alcoholic. He had a tremendous drinking problem. Doris told other family members that she was pretty disgusted with him. That's why so many family members were so surprised when, in the end, he was in control.
In 1991, Doris Duke removed Shandy as executor and replaced her with Dr. Harry Demopoulos, who billed himself as a longevity specialist.
When I went over with her who were the list of possible candidates for executor, Bernard wasn't even on the B list. He wasn't on the A list, he wasn't on the B list.
Within a year, that had changed. Dr. Demopoulos was dropped and replaced by Duke's accountant, who was then replaced by Duke's half-nephew, along with the butler, Bernard Lafferty.
When Harry Demopoulos and I heard that, we said, this isn't the Miss Duke that we know. This cannot have been a Miss Duke who was acting in her right mind at the time.
Wednesday.
Some say that Lafferty was a natural choice for co-executor. They claim that he was Doris's closest advisor and looked out for her best interests. But Doris's former housekeeper and her personal chef, who both sued Lafferty for harassment and breach of contract, disagree.
Bernard is definitely a manipulator. Bernard let people in and let them out. He picked up the phone. So after a while, he had control of who got in touch with Miss Duke.
He would instruct other employees of Miss Duke to have conversations with Miss Duke about how devoted he was to her. He was trying to win her trusts and affections in an obsessive kind of way.
Everything seems to be fine for now.
At the age of 78 and within days of naming Lafferty as co-executor, Doris decided to have extensive cosmetic surgery. The surgeon, Dr. Harry Glassman, was reportedly recommended by Lafferty. 2 days after the surgery, while on medication, Doris fell at home and broke her hip. Dr. Glassman referred her to Beverly Hills physician, Dr. Charles Kivowitz, who became her primary physician. Over the next year, Doris was in and out of the hospital several times. Following March, she was suffering from episodes of mild confusion. Around this time, she apparently decided to change her will and to give Bernard Lafferty power of attorney. Papers were drawn up by attorneys who had been recommended by Dr. Glassman. One of them, Bill Doyle, helped Doris at the signing.
Miss Duke, we've prepared your will.
The signing took place at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Ann Bostich was in the room and claims that Doris did not know what she was signing.
She couldn't really sign it. She just sat there like a wooden statue. And Bill Doyle lifted the will up and put his briefcase underneath to raise it up. And she still couldn't sign it. So he slid his hand under her wrist and sort of propelled her hand along so she could scrawl her name. And I stood there and I was totally shocked. I thought, there's something really wrong here.
Very good. Thank you very much, Miss Duke.
In a sworn deposition, Bill Doyle claims that Doris was of sound mind and knew what she was doing. A few weeks later, Lafferty was named sole individual executor of the estate. He went on a spending spree. $60,000 on Armani clothing, $25,000 on jewelry, and several thousand more on flowers and gifts, all charged to the estate. In July of 1993, Doris suffered a stroke. She returned home after 2 months in the hospital. Her bedroom had been turned into a makeshift intensive care unit with 24-hour nursing supervision.
Miss Duke? Miss Duke?
According to Dr. Kivowitz, Doris's condition began to deteriorate. But a nurse named Tammy Payette stated the following in a signed affidavit.
Within a short period of time after she arrived home, Ms. Duke's physical therapy was cut off, and she was placed on a massive sedation regime by Dr. Kivowitz at the request of Bernard Lafferty, Ms. Duke's butler.
But Tammy Payette's credibility has been called into question. She was convicted of stealing nearly $1 million in valuables from several of her patients and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. On October 7th, Dr. Kivowitz began to administer the painkiller Demerol by injection, even though Tammy Payette claims that Doris was not in pain. Payette also says Doris's request to return to the hospital was ignored.
They've got her home. She's signed the will. If they let her out, if they let her meet a friend, if they let somebody come in there and they rehab her, she may sign other wills. This is the time for Miss Duke to die.
She wanted to remain comfortable and pain-free there in her house. That's where, if she was going to die, she wanted to die, and Dr. Kivowitz followed her orders. He would have followed any orders she had given him.
10 days later, a package was delivered to the Duke mansion, addressed to one of the nurses.
And it was from a drug company somewhere. And Bernard jumped out of the chair and he ran over and he grabbed the box and he looked at it and then took it downstairs. And then a few minutes later, he said to me, "Oh, Miss Duke is going to die tonight."
That afternoon, Dr. Kivowitz substituted morphine for Demerol. In her affidavit, Tammy Payette made note of Lafferty's reaction to the day's events.
Later that evening, Bernard became very excited and impatient because Ms. Duke was lingering and called Dr. Kivowitz explaining that Ms. Duke had not expired.
Records indicate that Dr. Kivowitz returned to the mansion and administered another 10 milligrams of morphine. He recorded that Doris was in a state of advanced pulmonary edema, a fluid buildup in the lungs.
Everybody there knew that Miss Duke was going to be dying with the addition of that morphine, and you could see the lockstep relationship. Increased doses, drip, drip, drip into Miss Duke. Down goes the breathing, down goes the heartbeat, until we're at a flat line.
Ms. Duke, can you hear me?
By 4 a.m. on October 28th, Doris Duke was clinging to life.
Ms. Duke, can you hear me?
According to the records written by attending nurse Tammy Payette, Dr. Kivowitz phoned and increased the morphine dosage.
I asked in the deposition of the doctor, was she in pain? Of course not, she's unconscious, and yet we're increasing the morphine. There's no reason other than pain or terminating a patient to increase the morphine at that point, and that's what happened with Miss Duke.
Dr. Kivowitz did everything he could to keep her pain-free and comfortable, and whenever he gave Nurse Payette the discretion to increase the medication if necessary, Nurse Payette increased it far beyond what he authorized, then claimed 18 months later that he was the one over-medicating her. It doesn't make sense.
At 5:15 a.m., according to notes from another nurse, a 100 milligram dose of Demerol was added to the morphine drip by, quote, telephone order of Dr. Glassman per Dr. Kivowitz. 1 hour later, Doris Duke was dead.
I believe that woman wanted every chance possible to live. She had a strong constitution and a will, and I know she wanted to live, and I know they killed her.
Update. After a prolonged investigation, the Los Angeles DA's office found no credible evidence of criminal homicide in the death of Doris Duke. The civil suit challenging Duke's will, filed by her former housekeeper and cook, was also dismissed. Bernard Lafferty has since died. Next, a surprising update on a rapist and murderer who terrorized women in upstate New York. And later, a businessman vanishes after scamming the government out of millions of dollars. Previously, we reported on a serial rapist who had been targeting young women in and around Buffalo, New York for more than a decade. One of his first known victims was a 17-year-old girl taking a shortcut to school.
Shut up! Don't look at my face.
He started dragging me back into the woods, and then he started strangling me. And then I thought, that's it, I was gonna die.
After sexually assaulting the young woman, the rapist fled. He was described as a short, stocky, possibly Hispanic man with a mustache in his mid-30s. His next victim was a 16-year-old girl walking along some isolated railroad tracks.
The same individual double-wrapped a rope around her neck, gained control of her, and took her to the bush area behind me. He forced her to place tape over her eyes, he bound her, and sexually assaulted her.
Over several months, the attacker assaulted 6 women using the same method before letting them go. His 7th victim wasn't so lucky. 22-year-old Linda Yalem was a student at the State University in Buffalo when she was attacked. Linda was left to suffocate in the woods, her mouth and nose wrapped tight with duct tape.
It was premeditated murder. He planned on killing her when he grabbed her that day. Once he put that tape over her nose and her mouth, there was no chance for survival.
After 4 years, the man police called the bike path rapist struck again. A 14-year-old was his 8th known victim.
This guy strikes so infrequently, he's very hard to profile. Very, very difficult. He's either got tremendous self-control or else he's hitting in other parts of the country that we're not aware of.
Update. The so-called bike path rapist has been identified as 49-year-old Altemio Sanchez of Cheektowaga, New York. a suburb of Buffalo. Sanchez was a married church-going Little League coach with 2 grown children. Acting on a tip, police had put Sanchez under surveillance. They obtained DNA from a drinking glass at a restaurant Sanchez had visited and matched it with DNA found at some of the crime scenes. A DNA match also linked Sanchez to 2 earlier sexual assaults for which another man was already serving time. In 1985, Anthony Capozzi, who suffers from schizophrenia, was convicted of raping 2 women and was sentenced to 35 years in prison. After 22 years behind bars, Anthony was released and reunited with his family, who never doubted his innocence.
By the time that Artemio Sanchez was arrested, the statute of limitations had run out on the rape charges. Sanchez eventually pled guilty to 3 counts of murder in the 2nd degree and was sentenced to 75 years to life.
An April day off the coast of Louisiana in the Gulf of Mexico.
You gonna show me that hole?
Raymond Young, his son Edward, and 2 friends had been scuba diving since dawn. At 6 p.m., Raymond and Edward decided to take one final dive. 20 minutes later, Edward surfaced alone in a panic.
Help! Did you see my dad? No, I haven't seen him anywhere.
The peaceful outing became a crisis. Raymond Young was missing.
Come on up.
A massive search turned up nothing, and Young's family assumed he had drowned. But authorities were convinced that Young was alive and well, and that he had staged his own disappearance.
Raymond Young was the type of person who liked to gamble. He was a chance taker. He spent millions of dollars in his activities. He liked to live the good lifestyle, and he saw that he could make big money fast.
Raymond Young was a flashy, self-made millionaire who owned and operated a wholesale fuel company on Marco Island, Florida.
Message was right. Opportunity of a decade.
The company distributed diesel fuel for offshore marine use. Because he supposedly sold to wholesalers only, Young was exempt from paying certain federal taxes. But when customs officials found that millions of dollars were flowing in and out of Young's personal bank accounts, they began to suspect that his real business was scamming the government. In fact, Young had been selling his fuel to retail gas stations in Texas and pocketing the money he should have been paying in taxes. About 40 cents per gallon sold.
40 cents a gallon may not seem like a lot of money, but when you multiply that by the hundreds of thousands of gallons that Ray Young was distributing, he could have, in actuality, have defrauded the government for in excess of $15 million.
When the IRS and U.S. Customs Service launched a joint investigation, Young began to liquidate his assets. Eventually, he was charged with 17 counts of tax evasion. But Young left Florida while the investigation was still underway. Several months later, he surfaced in New Orleans, where federal agents set up a surveillance operation. They saw Young's Mercedes parked near a luxury yacht, which was being prepared for a voyage. And although the boat was flying a foreign flag, records show that it belonged to Raymond Young.
It is our man. Let's get him.
By all indications, Raymond did not think he was going to be found guilty on these charges. He had told all of his friends that he would not be convicted and felt very confident that that would be the case.
Ray, wait. Now that was a totally unexpected verdict.
Young could not have been more wrong. He was found guilty on 16 counts.
Counselor, I am not going to prison.
Even though Young faced up to 13 years in prison, he was granted bail to organize his personal and business affairs. 2 days before his sentencing, he went scuba diving in the Gulf of Mexico and has not been seen since.
We do feel that he has millions of dollars at his disposal, and he could live a very good lifestyle outside of the United States, wherever he pleased to live. He could be anywhere at this time, living a life of luxury.
Update. 7 years after Raymond Young disappeared, The U.S. Marshals Service received a tip that he was living in San Jose, Costa Rica. Police there set up a surveillance, and after one failed attempt, were finally able to capture him. Young fought extradition, but he was eventually returned to the United States. 4 months later, he was sent to prison for his original conviction of 7 years. Raymond Young has since been released. Next, doctors are puzzled by a strange illness that has afflicted 4 children in one family. Vallejo, California. One February day, Christina Smith returned home from a brownie meeting.
Mommy, I don't feel good. Why don't you come over here and sit down by me? I gave her medicine and I brought her upstairs. So she stayed up during the night complaining of her sore legs and stomach ache, which I actually thought it was due to the fact from the cold. The next morning, I thought it was a good idea for Christina to sleep in.
Just after breakfast, Christina's Uncle Joseph stopped by for a short visit.
I went upstairs and I found Christina laying down. She opened her eyes and looked at me, and there was a glaze in her eyes. Christina, you better get over here. There's something wrong with Christina. I'm talking to her, but she's not hearing me. We took her to the living room onto the couch, and at that time we started examining her, asking her what's wrong, and I didn't even feel like she knew where she was.
By that time, her neck had swelled, and she was having seizures.
Wake up, Christina. Christina, wake up.
At that moment, Tina's husband, Charles, arrived home from work.
I didn't know what was going on, so I walked over and I looked into Christina's eyes, and she looked relatively unconscious. Hey, doctor.
What's wrong?
Her family rushed Christina to the nearest hospital.
How long has she been like this?
Oh, for about 2 hours. I knew she was real sick.
You have a seizure?
I'm not sure. I was starting to become real frightened.
We have an unconscious child here. I don't know what's going on.
We were trying to search our minds to try to come up with what might have happened, but we had no answers.
Christina Smith was racked by seizures and her breathing was labored. Then she developed a fever and her temperature shot up to 105 degrees. Finally, Christina lapsed into a coma.
Christina is stable. She has had a massive seizure, and she's no longer seizing. We've given her medication.
Doctors and Christina's parents had no idea what caused the sudden illness, but they were afraid that it might be connected with what happened to 2-year-old Dominique, the youngest child of Christina's Uncle Joseph. A year earlier, Dominique had also been rushed to the hospital after suffering the same symptoms as Christina. Dominique fell into a coma and suffered severe brain damage. She died just 1 month before Christina got sick. Doctors still have no idea what caused Dominique's death.
I think the scariest part was being that I was there once before. I didn't think that these doctors knew what was going on.
Okay, Christina, here we go.
Got an extremely high fever, had great difficulty breathing, showed severe abnormal movements of her body. She had, despite all efforts, had remained in a non-responsive coma state, and that carries a terribly grave prognosis.
How are you doing? Fine?
You look at a child and you think it's hopeless. Many families stay away. In Tina's case and Charles, they came every day.
We felt that maybe she could hear us and she can feel us around her. There goes his ears and your ear. So we decided to keep her life as busy as possible while she laid there unconscious.
Soon, Christina's room was filled with get-well cards, posters, and her favorite toys. The hospital staff even organized potluck dinners, which everyone ate in Christina's room. Despite all the attention, there was no improvement in her condition. The doctors, who were still baffled by the disease, ordered more tests.
And after all those testing for months, they still did not locate her illness, what caused her to become ill. They realized that she had suffered brain damage. So they told us that Christina would remain a vegetable for the rest of her life, and that normally when a patient suffers brain damage, they don't recover.
It was felt at that time that she should be sent to an institution that could take care of her and just maintain her in her comatose state.
The Smiths refused to give up hope. They decided to look after Christina at home.
Okay, Christina, it's time for your favorite TV show. When we brought Christina home, I was happy but then scared, not knowing what might happen. Brakes on, okay? And Mommy's gonna go right behind you on the couch. The only thing I could do was just play it by ear and go with the emotions and how I felt for her care as each day went on.
But on this particular day, 6 weeks after Christina had come home, something extraordinary happened. Without any apparent cause, Christina completely awakened from her coma.
I didn't know what was going on. My heart dropped. I was so excited. I was in tears.
It was incredible. You know, I've never had a feeling like that. It was incredible.
Christina's recovery was remarkable. She began to move her arms and legs, her speech improved, and she started the long fight back to health. Soon, she was enrolled in physical therapy.
It was just an exciting, incredible change in a youngster who had been so desperately ill. All the 30 years that I've been in this field, I've never seen a family or a situation exactly like this. It was just unique.
This mystifying illness seems to be centered on Tina and Joseph's family. In total, 3 of Christina's cousins have been afflicted. 2 of them did not recover and died.
In my own medical experience, I've never seen anything to equal the devastation in this particular family, and certainly it is one of the unsolved medical mysteries at this time.
If there are any doctors or families who know of similar cases, please log on to our website at Unsolved